code generation technique, Swagger. How it behaves, Cloud Vendor Controller. Hello everyone, very warm welcome to Think Constructive. I am Isha. In this session, I will be talking about how to do API documentation, more specifically for Spring Boot REST API projects. Alright, I will be starting with what and why of API documentation, followed by the tools and techniques to generate documentation automatically. So be assured it will not be the manual documentation technique, rather it will be the code generation technique, and that complete explanation will be followed by the detailed demonstration in which we will be evolving our Cloud Vendor API application. Alright, so stay connected, watch the session till the end so that you don't miss upon on any of the core concepts. Alright, so let us start with the discussion now. I'll first talk about what is Swagger, what all areas it can be used, and then we will be specifically focusing on the API documentation part. Alright, so as you might be knowing, Swagger has gained a lot of popularity in the software industry because of its documentation capability. So when we talk about documentation capability, it's not like you are going to open any editor like Notepad or WordPad or Microsoft Word, anything like that, and you'll start writing, document over there. No, it's not like that. Swagger makes it easy for developer to do the documentation with the help of code itself. Alright, so that is where Swagger has gained a lot of popularity. Although Swagger can be used for variety of different ways. It can be used to develop the API, to create the interaction between APIs, and documenting APIs. Other than that, there are many more usage. I'll now go through each and every usage of Swagger. It can be used for API design, or development, or testing, or it can be used for API mocking, API governance, API monitoring, and API documentation. These are the majority of the areas where Swagger can be used. But API documentation is one area where Swagger has really got lots and lots of popularity. And the reason will be very clear once I'll walk you through the complete demonstration. Because then as a developer, you'll be able to quickly relate and understand. It has really taken out all the pain of doing the manual documentation away and automated the stuffs for developers. Alright, so I've listed down here the majority of the capabilities of Swagger. Let's quickly move towards API documentation and we'll focus and we'll see how Swagger helps us there. Alright. So as we discussed, Swagger takes the manual work out of the API documentation. That means in code, I should be adding, some dependencies or some annotations, and the things are done, right? It helps us generating, visualizing, and maintaining API docs. Why do we say that? When we say, as a developer, I'm supposed to add certain kind of dependencies or annotations in the code itself, and the document will be generated. That means the manual task is gone and it will be auto-generated. After generating that document, we can visualize it via Swagger user interface as well as with the help of client tools such as Postman, right? When I talk about maintaining API docs, that means as a developer, we know development is an ongoing process. It's never like that the code is, done and it will never ever be touched. Never like that, right? Code continue getting evolved. Let's say in last release, some APIs has been written according to which the documentation was generated. Now, in the next release, there are furthermore, additions in that API. Then ideally, the document has to be updated accordingly. Okay, so that pain also is taken away by Swagger from the developers. And what happens whenever any API gets updated and Swagger is already integrated there, so that will automatically generate the updated API documents. So I hope this point is very clear. Now let us quickly understand why API documentation is so important, because whatever API is being made, it will accept the request, does some processing and generate the output, which is response. So what happens? It works in request response structure. These APIs has to be consumed by some REST client. It can be user interface, it can be any third party application, anything. in order to make those client developers, that can be your UI developers or can be third-party application developers, in order to make them understand what this API is expecting in request, how the request structure should be, what number of parameters it should have, or what is, URL it is having, and how is it generating and giving the response back to the client. Those client developers must understand this request and response structure fully to consume those APIs. All right. There is one way to write all those manual documentation, keeps on, changing that and getting into so many discussions all the time whenever there is even any simple single minute change happens, isn't it? In order to take away all these problems, what Swagger has done, they have automated the complete stuff. Okay, so whenever there is any change in the API request response, any kind of change, documentation will be updated if you have integrated Swagger in your code, and then client developers can directly refer that updated documentation and act accordingly. All right, so Swagger has made everyone's life very simple. That is where it has gained vast popularity in industry for its API documentation. Other areas are also good, but I'm sticking to API documentation here in this session. All right, and here is a website, swagger.io. I'll quickly open the swagger.io website and we'll show you certain stuff. Then we'll move towards demonstration. All right, so I'll just open swagger.io website. Okay. So here is a Swagger website. Many things they give it for free, and for enterprise level stuffs, certain things are chargeable. Okay, so those details you can just go down in this website here and it is mentioned. All right, it is open source. Swagger Hub, with these capabilities you get for free, and in Swagger Hub Pro you get additional features. All right. So we will be using that our open source stuffs. API documentation will demonstrate you. All right. So this is the Swagger website. And also one more point to notice, Swagger is supported by SmartBear. All right. So the capabilities, what I showed you, if you come to Why Swagger stuff, you can see all these capabilities. And if you would like to explore it further, you can just click on anyone or whichever capability you would like to see. You can just get inside that link and explore more stuffs. All right, so this is about Swagger website. Now I will quickly open IntelliJ IDEA Editor and we'll start with the demonstration. Here is the IntelliJ IDEA Editor. I will be using IntelliJ IDEA for the coding purposes. You can use any other Java editor of your choice. All right, so for this demonstration, I will be further evolving our Cloud Vendor API application, the application which we have been building in our previous sessions. So just in case if you missed watching those sessions, I will highly recommend you to go ahead and watch those sessions. I have tagged all those Spring Sessions link in the above card section, as well as links are given in the description box below. And those sessions are also getting flashed on your screen right now. All right, so feel free to watch all these sessions, because right from session 1, we are taking one particular concept and evolving this application with the help of that concept. For this session, I'll give you a very quick walkthrough for Cloud Vendor API application so that you can relate the code what we are going to do now. All right. So inside source main Java, what we have done, we have built our COM Think Constructive REST demo. Inside controller, we have built Cloud Vendor controller layer, which is having all CRUD operations inside it. All right. Then we have our model class, which is our Cloud Vendor class. This class is having all the required properties which we want this Cloud Vendor entity to have. All right, and this Cloud Vendor is getting saved in the database with the help of Cloud Vendor info table. All right. We have repository layer to interact with the databases. We have then service layer, okay, to have all the business logic inside it. All right. And also we have done custom response handling as well as exception handling. All these things we have covered in our previous sessions. Also, in our previous sessions, we have done unit testing full tutorial for all the CRUD operations. So all those things are already available on the channel. Links, as I told, you can get from the card section above or from the description section below. There is a playlist also created, so you can, reach to the targeted session by any means. All those links I have already given. All right. So now let us start with the Swagger additions in this application. Okay. So first thing, we'll see what dependency is needed in order to have Swagger in your application. So in order to add dependency, you should open pom.xml. Okay. In pom.xml, you can see many other dependencies are there because we are building and evolving this application with every session for all other concepts, because this application is capable enough to save data in the database, to query from the database, to do exception handling, to do custom response handling, and also all the required unit test cases also for all CRUD operations. So there are many other things also involved here. That is where pom.xml has many dependencies already. So here for Swagger specific stuff, I will tell you which dependency to add. Okay. So what you need to do, you need to just add dependency tag. It will ask for the group ID and artifact ID. So for group ID, what I'll give io.springfox. Okay. And in artifact ID, you can notice it has already filled Springfox boot starter dependency. Just in case if you don't get it, you can, copy it and paste it there. And version, the latest version is 3.0.0 at the time of recording this session. Okay, so this is just one POM dependency you should be having. Okay, I will also tell you from the website how can you get this dependency. Before that, one more thing, Swagger supports many other programming language. So what we need to see, we need to look for the Swagger Spring specific dependency. Okay, so that Spring specific dependency is Spring Fox Swagger Maven dependency. Okay, that's how you should search for it. And then you should go to the Maven link and you can notice Springfox Swagger 2 3.0.0 is the latest one. Okay, so we have added this only. Either way you can just copy the dependency from here and add it to your pom.xml. Fine. So you have added the Springfox dependency specific for Swagger in your pom.xml. You can now refresh the Maven dependencies. That is very important. Every time you add or remove any dependency or change any dependency details from your pom.xml, you should do a Maven refresh. Okay. So it has got the required dependency. After adding this dependency, my Spring Boot application has become capable to generate the API documentation. All right, all the default things will happen and it will be able to generate document which we will be able to test via Postman as well as from Swagger UI. I'll show you both the stuffs now. Then I will tell you which all customization, what all is needed you can do. All right, I will now start the application and will show you how you can check the API documentation with the help of Postman as well as with the help of Swagger UI. Okay. And after that, how you can do certain customizations. All right. What happened? My application couldn't come up and I ran into some issues. Okay. If you notice, what issue it is talking about? Failed to start Bean documentation plugins bootstrapper. Nested exception. All right. After looking at this, I can understand I have done just now some changes related to documentation and similar kind of error I am getting. Okay. So I'll tell you the fix to sort out this error, which is coming very frequently in the latest Swagger versions. All right. What you need to do, you need to add MVC, path match and matching strategy as and path matcher. Okay, because there are some matching stuffs which are still not sorted. So in order to do that, you need to add this kind of switch in your application.yaml or application.properties, whichever file you are using, and then you won't be getting this error. All right. So I'll just again start the application and we'll show you. So this time you can notice my application is successfully up and running. You can see this log, started REST application. Cool. Yeah. So my error is sorted. Now let's use the Postman and see certain stuffs. All right. So here is a Postman tool. And let's say I would want to create one Cloud Vendor application. Let's say we are going to create C5. Cloud Vendor created successfully. Okay. And in request body, it is taking 4 parameters like this. Fine. And let us now execute get by ID for Cloud Vendor C5. Okay. Send. What have I got? I've got a proper response wherein data is filled like this, HTTP status and message. Fine. Let us now check the Swagger documentation using Postman. So this is the URL for checking the Swagger documentation. So I have already created the request. What you can do, you can just say a right click here, add request. Okay. Select method as get, and here you can give the URL. Okay. Like this. So in the URL, last things v3/API docs will be fixed. Here instead of localhost, you can write the IP wherever your REST application is up and running and the corresponding port. All right. So I'll just say v3/API docs and we'll say send. You can see down below. I'll just come back to these, info kind of stuff. So here inside paths, you can notice /cloud vendor, then get method, right? This is for get all, correct? That's what we have done. Responses you can see. And then if you'll go down, you can see put method. Likewise, you'll be able to find out all the methods here. Their parameter details, their responses details, everything. All right. Now I will show you how can you check the stuffs with the help of Swagger UI. Okay. So for Swagger UI, IP:port. Okay. And then you should give Swagger-UI /. Okay. This part is fixed. Swagger-UI. Okay. And here you can see API documentation page is open. API documentation URL is given here. Okay. Then server stuffs. Okay. And down below basic error controller, cloud vendor controller, all these stuff. So see, get cloud vendor. Okay. Put cloud vendor. All these things, 5 methods we have, all 5s are displayed. And then in the schema, you can see we have cloud vendor schema. So cloud vendor, all 4 properties are listed here. Fine. But above it is written some generic terms, API documentation, then here also API documentation, and then I am getting some extra basic error controller, all these kind of stuffs here. So these things are auto generated, or you can say by default generated by Swagger. So in my application, if I don't want to have this basic error controller, which is a default generation thing, and also the default taglines, API documentation, and by default terms of service, or these kind of stuffs, I want to customize them and to write my own. These are doable, and I'll now show you how can you do that. All right. So let us go back to our IntelliJ. I will first terminate the application. So my application is terminated. Fine. Now in order to customize, I'll come back to RESTdemo application.java file, wherein specifically my Spring Boot application starter point is given. Okay. And inside this, I should be creating a docket bean. Okay. So docket bean is responsible to define that behavior. If we don't give it, it will take all the default stuffs which we have just now seen. If I want to customize it, I should be overriding all those stuffs here. Okay. So I will first be annotating that as bean. Okay. Inside this, I will say public docket Swagger configuration. Let's say I'm giving the name. You can give any other name of your choice. Okay. Main idea is to have this docket bin. Fine. This name can be anything. Inside this, since it is returning docket, so that means I should have a return statement which will be returning the instance of this docket. Okay. So I'll just say return new docket. We should instantiate this docket bean with the help of documentation type Swagger2. Okay. And further, we should be defining a behavior which it should be building. Okay. So ultimately, this final return value will have a docket instance built with the customized data. Okay. So I'll just say select. It's a specific method. We should understand what everything is happening here. All right. So inside paths, I should give path selectors dot and fine. And here inside this, I should be giving or defining the URLs which I would want to see finally in my Swagger documentation. Fine. So in our case, what documentation I would want to have? Cloud vendor, okay, /star. Fine. And then I should define the APIs. Now inside API, I should define request handler selectors dot base package. Inside this, I should give my package name wherein everything, all my code exists. So I'll give the parent package name here. All right. Then finally, I'll build the response. So I'll say build. Fine. Now, after building this complete response, I should be passing the API information like what should be its headline, what should be the license value, what should be the email IDs, all those kind of stuffs. That can be done with the help of API info. Okay. This API info is expecting, see, this API info object. Okay. So let us build that object down here itself and we'll pass that. Okay. So I'll now create a private method here which should return API info. Okay. And I can give any method name here. Let's say I'm saying API custom data. Right? This is what we are doing. So similar kind of name I have given. Inside this API custom data, I will be returning API info object. Why? Because this is what method should return, and ultimately this API info is expecting API info object here. Correct? So we are currently constructing that. Okay. Now inside this API info, we will pass all the custom parameters which we want to have in our documentation. All right. So first thing, you can see the constructor of this API. It is expecting title, description, version, terms of service URL, license URL, and vendor extensions. All right. So I'll just copy and paste it down below here so that we all can refer it. Okay. And understand it in parallel. Fine. I'll remove it later. So first thing, what is it expecting? Title. Okay. So what should I give in the title? Let's say I will say cloud vendor API application. All right. Then next parameter, I would want to give the description. So here I will say cloud vendor documentation. Okay. Then I should give some version. So let's say 1.0. Okay. All these things will be string. Terms of service URL. So in terms of service URL, let's say I'm writing cloud vendor service terms. Okay. Then next thing, you should notice it is asking for contact. And this contact is not a normal string, rather it is a contact object. Okay. So for that, I should be constructing that contact object. So it is directly suggesting me. Okay. It comes from a Spring Fox itself. So in that contact object, I should be first giving the name, URL and email. All three will be string. Okay. So first, let's say I'm giving my name. Then the URL is expected. So I'll give the website URL here. Okay. And then the email address, that will also be the string. Okay. Fine. So this is my contact object. After that, license is expected, which is in string format. So let's say I will write think constructive license. Okay. And then at last, no, last two are left. So license URL it is asking. Okay. So I'll just give my website as a license URL. All right. And then the last argument is vendor extensions. Okay. So I don't have any vendor extensions as of now. So I will just say collections.emptylist. I'll pass it as empty list. Fine. So all the parameters we have filled in here in order to customize our Swagger documentation. All good. And now I will pass this method here inside API info. All right. Fine. So what we are doing, we are building a docket bean in order to do the customization for Swagger configuration. And inside this, all the required parameters, path, API, all those stuffs we have passed. And then finally for API info, we have built, or rather we have created a method and we have passed that method directly here. Fine. Now let us bring up the application and see how it behaves. So you can see my application is up and running. Fine. Started REST demo application. Fine. Now let us go back to Swagger UI and see how it behaves now. So here is the Swagger UI. I have just refreshed it and you can see Cloud Vendor API application instead of API documentation simply. The version as 1.0. You can see terms of service and you can see website URL here. So Ishapuri website. I'll just open and show you. This is Think Constructive's official website. You can get many more articles here. Okay. So if you wish to refer other stuffs or some more articles, you can always visit this website. Fine. Send an email to Ishapuri. So we have given some email address. Let me just copy email address. Paste it probably here in IntelliJ itself. Fine. See the same email address we had filled in here. All right. So now coming back to this and then Think Constructive license, some license things we have given. Here down below you can now see only Cloud Vendor controller which we are targeting to build and no more, extra packages, base error packages or the default stuffs. So the moment I'll click on this Cloud Vendor controller, I'll see my 5 methods here. So let me show you one by one. I'll just go to Get Cloud Vendor. Get all Cloud Vendor details will be displayed here. Okay. And I can directly test my REST API from here itself. Okay. So the moment I'll say that, I'll just say try out. Okay. Since Get all Cloud Vendor details doesn't expect any parameter and here it is showing me if everything goes fine, what kind of response we get. All right. So I will say get all Cloud Vendor details and let me just execute. Since currently there is no data existing for the Cloud Vendor, I am getting a blank response or blank in the response body. Fine. Likewise, you can go down and create a post request from here. Then put get delete. All requests you can try out from here itself. Okay. Inside the model, you can see Cloud Vendor model, one model we have. So the same is getting displayed with all 4 properties. Fine. So that's how you can use Swagger for documentation as well as testing your REST API application as well. Fine. Now there is one more thing which I would like to demonstrate, although that is not, kind of mandatory step. That is optional step, but it is always good to have, good to do those things. Fine. So I'm back to IntelliJ IDEA Editor. I'll first terminate the application. Fine. Now I'll open my controller layer and will show you certain steps here. Currently what we have seen, get all, so it was written as get mapping or get all mapping, those kind of basically basis on this method name, the details we were able to see. But if I want to make it more explanatory, fine, if I want that if someone opens that Swagger UI, they should be able to explicitly understand in more detail what this get mapping or / vendor ID is doing. I can add an additional information with the help of @API operation annotation. So here we can specify certain stuffs which will make it more clear what kind of value it accepts or it doesn't accept any value, what kind of processing it does, and what kind of responses it provides. Fine. So let's say in value I will give what it expects. It expects cloud vendor ID. Fine. What it does, inside nodes, the processing stuffs we can write. So I will just say cloud vendor details. Okay. And then let me just shift it. Yeah. And then what kind of response it generates? Response is equal to what response is it giving? Response entity, right? So I'll just say response entity dot class. Cool. Yeah. So we'll just test it also. So what we have done, API operation, what value it expects, we have elaborated that. Okay. And then what processing it does, you can write much more details here. And then in the response, what kind of response is it generating? Fine. So by doing this small change, we have made this method notes or documentation much more clear. All right. Now let me just demonstrate one more step here. We'll go inside our cloud vendor model class. Okay. And if we want to define what this class is exactly for and what each property means, so that kind of detailed explanation also can be added here. How can we do that? For class, at class level, we will say API model annotation. Inside this, we will add description for this class. Okay. This table holds cloud vendor information. All right, it can be anything. I'm just demonstrating certain stuffs. Okay, so that's how you can write a description for this entity. Okay, so this is at the entity level. At the properties level also, you have certain annotations with which you can define or detail out the stuffs. So I'll say API model property. Fine. Model level we have given, and now at the property level, we can just write inside nodes. Let's say for vendor ID we are writing, this is a cloud vendor ID. It shall be unique. Okay. So that's how you can write all the detailed information. So the moment I have added these kind of information, whenever my Swagger documentation gets generated, it will have these kind of extra stuffs which will be more explanatory. All right. So let me just save and quickly bring up the application and we will see the changes now. All right. So you can see here in the logs, my application is up and running. Okay. Let us come back to the browser window and let me just refresh it. Let us just close all this. Yeah. So now what did we change? We did change in the get by ID thing. So you can see cloud vendor ID is written here. Correct. And inside this, the detailing is written provide cloud vendor details. Okay. So here what it expects and here what this method is processing. All that description comes here. Fine. Similarly, if we go down inside model, inside Cloud Vendor, you can see for this table, the description is now written, this table holds Cloud Vendor information, and here for vendor ID, this is a Cloud Vendor ID, it shall be unique. So all those detailing also added here. This will be very helpful for any consumer who is consuming your APIs. Without doing too much of manual work, all these things are generated. Alright, although adding these kind of API model property, API operation annotation and many more optional annotations are there to further detailing the documentation, but these things are completely optional up to your project, whatever things are expected. But yeah, generally it is a good idea to give good documentation stuffs in your code in order to maintain your code in longer run as well as in order to make consumers' life easy. Alright, let's summarize what all we have learned in this session. We have discussed what and why of API documentation, what is it and why is it so important, what tool we should be using. So we have used Swagger. So we have learned what and why of Swagger, and Swagger is not limited to API documentation, but this is one area which has really given great visibility to Swagger. And that was followed by Swagger demonstration for our Cloud Vendor API application. So our Cloud Vendor API application is further evolved to hold the REST API documentation. And after adding Swagger to our Cloud Vendor API application, we have tested it using Postman and using Swagger UI. And further, we have done certain customization also. I hope these things are very, very clear to everyone. Whatever doubts you have, please ask your doubts in the comment section, and whatever part of the code you found it really very useful, tag that timeline in the description box below. This will be helping everyone. Thank you everyone for watching this session. I'm sure after watching this session and trying out all the examples, you must be more confident for writing API documentation for your REST API Spring Boot project. If you haven't yet tried the complete example, I will highly recommend you to try the example along with the session. That will greatly help you. There are more and more Java Spring Boot sessions available on my channel, so feel free to explore them. Also ring the notification bell so that you are always updated with the new and upcoming sessions on this channel, because I'll continue bringing Java, Spring Boot and more related technologies sessions here. If you haven't yet shared the channel details with your friends and your colleagues, please do so, because that will help us to grow more stronger together as a community. Thank you once again. See you in the next session. Bye for now.